falter when we get the right answer?
Maybe.
Drop through the floor.
Better than when it was gone, folks.
We're not gonna gone yet, for nothing, no. Anybody wanna start? Are we not ready to start?
Sure. I guess one of the questions, some of the questions I have, or one of them, is that when we met on 3/14/12 and talked to you folks, there was a, it was mentioned that there was a $1.5 million gap, that's, in my notes it says, and correct me because these are my notes, a 4 to 5% cost variance for the budget. It was talking about Paul doing some of the renovating work, you know, in the, on the high school complex in particular. That's what I was talking about. I guess my concern, and I know what's going to be the concern of the public, is they have a certain image in mind of what they're going to get for this, what they voted for. And also I have, because we had various meetings, that there was a 25% contingency fund for projects built into this. Are we well past that? Are we already having a problem that did we appropriate or not appropriate enough money for this project, which was $11,971,420? In other words, did we not ask for enough to do these projects? Because in the notes I have here, it wasn't mentioned, for example, at Riverview of doing a patch job on the roof, but a new roof, as it was, of course, obviously at Mullen. Obviously, perhaps Mullen is in worse shape than we thought, but to just get 5 years off a patch job on Mullen, Riverview, wouldn't seem to be prudent, because if you patch the problem areas and then you have areas that are more problems later, obviously that's not going to be covered by any warranty or anything, if there's any warranty on patchwork whatsoever. And these, I think, are some of the concerns. What are we going to get for what was presented to the public? And as we change it, the cost variance and all these variables that are coming into the picture, it's creating some hesitation by people, or just question what's going on. And I'll just leave it to you guys on that. Thanks.
Starch. Okay. I think from the outset, I think there's been a budget challenge to varying degrees. So let me start as far back as I can. Prior to our involvement, there was an estimate done by Turner, and I think that was the basis for your referendum amount. Again, it was before we came on board, but they did a fairly detailed estimate, and it was about just a little over $11 million for what I would call the core project. The addition, the turf field, the bleachers, basically that core of the project. Sure. So there were no roof projects in that early estimate. Then I believe you added what it looks like $975,000 to what that initial Turner estimate was $11 million to get to your referendum amount of $11,975,000.
Yeah.
So once the referendum is passed, that dollar amount is fixed.
That's it.
That's all you have.
Can I interject one thing? Turner didn't do that. It was.
No, Turner did it as a courtesy.
Okay, all right, yeah.
But it's a fairly detailed, and we've been through it in detail to make sure things line up between there and there. So it's a fairly thorough starting point, similar to what we would have done if we had been on board in the pre-ref stages. We would have done a similar type of. So I think it was a good estimate to start with.
But if it was good, if we're short, and we didn't ask for enough capital project goal for referendum, and now we're running into problems, should we have basically gone for more?
I don't think so. I think, as with most projects, the nature of the project changes as the project develops.
Yeah.
So very early on, you have a list of maybe 3, 4, 5 key things that this is what you want for your project. Obviously, the turf field, stadium, bleachers, the music addition, those were big components that were very clear, like this is what we want as a part of our program. So I think everyone involved basically made the best guess they could at the time, saying, all right, here's what we want for our project, here's what we think it's gonna cost, here's what we're gonna, you never wanna ask the voters for too much, and you don't wanna ask them for too little, so that you're, again, it's a fine line of how do we ask for enough, get enough to do what we really wanna have, without asking for too much, or basically, you know, especially in these times, financially, you just don't wanna ask for too much. So I think it was a reasonable request as far as what you went out for your bond referendum. Again, but there's not extra pools of money within that 11,975. So, again, as you develop a project, whether it's in your house or a big project of this scale, things pop up, things happen, oh, I'd like to have this, I'd like to have that. Meanwhile, those dollars don't change from the beginning. Again, what you set as your referendum amount is a fixed amount, and that's it. And so, part of our task as the construction manager is keeping our eye on that target. And we always have to make sure that we fall within that target. There are certain things that have to be within that budget. We know that there are gonna be incidental expenses. Soft costs, they're sometimes called, architect's fees, construction manager's fees, legal fees, surveying, testing, there's a whole host of things. They typically amount to anywhere from 20 to 25% of your project budget. I think in this case, we're a little bit below 20%. So I think we're being pretty austere with the dollars that are in the incidental cost allowance. But again, start with 11,975. And we take that incidental cost right off. That leaves you with the dollar amount that's available for construction. So from that number, you then want to set aside dollars for change orders. You know they're going to happen, especially on renovation work. You're going to uncover things that you don't know about. Although we like to think architects are perfect and they never miss a single thing on their drawings, little things pop up in here and there, and you need to set aside dollars for change orders. It happens on every job. We then subtract that. That gives you a dollar amount that is basically dollars available for bid day. And in this case, after you take away the incidental cost allowance and dollars for change order, you basically have $9,667,000 for round numbers. So then, the next task is, we estimate all the project components, see what those costs are. They come off that, the dollars available by construction, and we basically see where we're at. In addition, let me make this clear as well. You have, within our estimate, what we call a design contingency. So, the best way to explain that is, again, when you start at the very beginning of a project, you have these big items, they're not very well defined. You know we want the turf, you know we want the stadium, you know we want the music addition, things of that nature, but we don't really know exactly what they are. And so, from our perspective as an estimator, we put a contingency on there because all the lines are not drawn on the paper yet. And to the extent we're able to, we know, having done this thousands of times, that what those things are that aren't on the paper typically. So we plan for a lot of that. But again, things are gonna pop up that nobody considered. It's, oh no, we always had this little thing in the project. So what we do is, to our estimate, we add a design contingency. And typically how that works is, it goes from, in the early stages of concept, anywhere from 15 to 20% of the total budget, or the total estimate, is just a contingency for things we don't know about. As you get into schematics, it goes down from 10–15%, and as you get into design development, it'll drop again down to somewhere between 5 and 8%.
Is that on the 9,667 or the 11?
It would come out of that 9,667.
Okay, out of that.
Gotta take
I wanted to give kind of an
I had
overview.
a question I wanted to ask 10 minutes ago, and I raised my hand. You can't just ask a question without going to anybody else.
I'll make sure I answer every question.
We're trying to answer every question.
I just kind of wanted to paint an overall picture of the budget, and then as you have questions, we can get into the details of it. And so we're at a point now where we're through design development. At that point, we carried a 5% design contingency. When we get to the next and final estimate, which is construction documents, there will be 0 design contingency. All those dollars basically roll up into things that are now printed on the page that we can take off and quantify. So that's kind of a broad brush, 10,000-foot view of how the estimating and budget procedure happens. So, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Stuart?
I have a couple questions. First off, when I was notified of this workshop, it was, we were going to have a presentation from start to finish to bring us up to speed. But the meeting opened with concerns from March. So I'm a little confused because I didn't prepare questions. Let me just finish. I didn't prepare questions because I was waiting to see what had changed since our presentation in June. And now I'm hearing concerns in the community that we're not on, that we're short, there's a shortfall in money. Is there a shortfall in money?
Not to my knowledge.
That's what we're trying to clarify.
Okay, but this was presented as a workshop to bring us up to speed from start to present, which we had one of those presentations in June. So my concern was, what has changed? But the meeting opened with, who has questions? So was this meeting to bring us up to speed where they can tell us where we're at, or an I got you move where we're just gonna start throwing community questions at them?
What I asked for was a discussion between the board and them, so that we could sit down and talk about what we're hearing, have them explain to us. And that's how we explained it.
Well, I noticed that we're having a presentation. I'm not seeing a presentation, I'm seeing answer, that
Well,
there's
it's-
prepared questions
it's
that not all the
discussion.
board knew about.
It's
I
gonna be
agree.
all discussion, that's what I asked.
Yeah, our understanding, I mean, we could prepare a presentation, but I thought we were coming to answer questions and just have an informal conversation
That's
about
what it is, it's an informal conversation.
That
how
notice
we're,
should've went
how
out.
things are going, and kind of go back to the beginning, explain where we're at, where
So
we
are
go
we on
moving forward. I believe we are on target, budget-wise. Schedule-wise, we obviously have had a hiccup, we talked about that at the last meeting. And we can, I have a really detailed 6-page schedule, we can get into talking about that if we want to, but I can, again, give you a broad brush, or we can get into as much detail as anybody has stuff to do.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I appreciate that, thank you very much.
So,
I too am also concerned because the voters voted. This project was voted to go forward. So I don't know what 1 or 2 people are coming forward and bringing stuff to just you two. But it would be nice if the whole board knew about what the concerns were instead of coming and putting these people on the spot. It basically comes down to there's needs and wants. You run into unknowns, you ask for as much as you can get, but you compromise for what you can afford. In construction, you will not know what's behind a wall until you take that wall down. So you cannot know if a roof is gonna be needed to be totally patched or totally redone or patched. It all is up in the air until you get to there. So try to make it sound like someone's trying to pull a fast one or something, sly is going on is not the case. And that's the problem, is that we need to put those, situations to rest and not be, unknown to everybody. This project was voted unanimously by the district to go forward, and we should be being positive and support them however we can. I don't know why we're starting this meeting off like this. I did not know this was gonna be this kind of meeting either. I just express that.
this is my turn.
Okay, I just had a couple of questions because I looked at what the public voted for the project. And my question is, did we eliminate a lot of this? Because when I look at that and then this one, which is more of the one that we're at, we kind of lost art and I gotta put my glasses on, sorry. And the technology wing that we were gonna have by where the band and the choral was. I'm trying to understand, like, I know you said we have to cut back because we gotta follow the budget. And we also had a special ed wing, that might have been something that was above and beyond what we wanted. But I'm just trying to understand that this is what we had, and now we're at this, and so is this more of the final? Like, we had to take a lot of this out?
I think, and Brian can probably speak to some more detail, but we never really had additions that housed those components you spoke about, but we did have renovation work. And then there was special ed tech, art, and what we found as the design developed and people within the district that were part of the program said, oh yeah, I'd love to have this or have that. And what happened was the renovation grew from what was initially roughly $500,000 worth of renovation work to about $2 million worth of renovation work by the time, by the time everyone said, well, I'd like to have this, I'd like to have that, well, if we move this over here and do this, and do it. And finally, part of our job is to say, time out, it's great that everybody had their input, but here's what we can afford. Couple that with, at the same time, we've had for probably the last 3 or 4 years, a pretty flat economy in the construction business, with really things costing the same from 2007, 2008, 2009. I mean, it's really been flat. There hasn't been any real escalation, is what we call it, or increase in costs. And within the last year, we've seen those things start to spike up. And I think it's just, there isn't really a lot of construction work out in the economy right now. And I think the fact that there's been so little work for the last few years have held those prices down. Contractors are taking projects for no profit or for very, very little profit. And at some point, they really can't afford to do that anymore. And so what I think we're seeing is as a little bit more construction starts to come into the economy, those costs are really kind of taking off and kind of filling in that hole for the last 3 years where nothing went up cost-wise. And when we recognized this pretty early, it started happening with electrical and mechanical type projects. And we were seeing those projects come in 10, 12, 14% over what we had estimated. We have electrical and mechanical estimators in-house, and they track that stuff pretty closely. And again, it was just like a spike almost. And what our belief was that eventually those mechanical and electrical increases were going to start to work their way into the general construction, which is masonry and concrete and things of that nature. And so we prepared when we looked at these budgets, and again, a lot of estimating is some art, some science. You really need, a crystal ball as well as a lot of other information to put those estimates together. But we saw the trend, and as a part of, monitoring the budget for this project, we said we better start to pull in the reins a little bit, because we could lose 8, 10, 12% of program that we already thought we were going to get, with respect to dollars, just because of escalation and cost increases. And so part of our effort, we have a program that everyone's saying we want more renovations, and we're saying, time out, we can't even afford, what we thought we could. So we're trying to balance, and we're also at the same time trying to maintain the core of the project that's been promised to the community. So that's really been our high wire act for the last 6 months or so. Trying to balance program, keeping the core intact, trying to be smart with how we detail the buildings and the renovations and the field work, so that we're making very smart decisions along with the design professional about what materials we're using, what systems we're using. Do we really need to do this? Do we really need to replace the whole roof on Riverview when it's not really all that bad? Will it be a concern 5 years from now? It probably will, but again, you have to weigh all these things together and really make smart decisions as you move along. So,
Well,
kind of a long answer to your
I
short
guess
question, sorry.
Part of that was is that who decided to eliminate the art, concentrate on band and the stadium, but yet we lost, that's just my question, is, because that's,
I think there's no renovation that happens.
Let me answer
yeah.
that. I'll go back quite a ways. When public school projects, the way the process works, the voters have to vote for a project to go forward. But in order for the voters art rooms, put the locker rooms, and then building locker rooms and music rooms out front, music room, because you can't, there was not enough volume in the existing band room to renovate it. So that was really our idea. As we got into the project, we spent some time with faculty, and we fleshed out those plans. In the meantime, SED said, we're not gonna pay for those locker rooms wherever you put them. You got a lot of locker rooms in that school. So that kind of changed some of the bases that went into our original notion. So the plans that went to the public showed some art rooms and music suite, and I thought it was a pretty good idea. Once the voters approved it, then we sat down and worked intensively with staff. And between staff and administration, we included two things. One is that the art rooms and the technology rooms share students. So as time goes by, probably in 5 or 7 or 10-year swings, kids decide to take art, and then they decide to take technology. And by building those art rooms out in the corner, a long way from technology, we created a problem, A. And B, and maybe the bigger issue, was that the school's population projections did not call for an increase in students. So adding more art rooms was tough to justify. So really, at that point, it wasn't a financial concern, it was more of a programmatic. So then we looked at moving the art rooms over into the technology wing, so there could be an art room one year or a technology room the next year. That made a lot of sense. And that's where the couple $1 million of renovation came up, and we said, hold on, that's we're not gonna be able to support that in the budget. So we sat down with the art faculty, and they said, you know, we never wanted to move in the first place. We like where we are. We didn't need the space for the locker rooms. So it was a series of multiple discussions. No, I don't think any one person made the decision. It was a lot of dialogue back and forth, but it seemed to make a ton of sense. So the fact that projects evolve is part of the process. If districts were willing to spend $500,000 or $600,000 up front to define a project, they wouldn't change later. But no one's willing to spend that money before the voters have said, we want to build that project. So you deal with this best guess, and frankly, in this project is pretty, in fact, this project is almost precisely what was originally asked for by the district. A stadium and a new art suite, or sorry, music suite. So it's ended up being almost exactly what was originally asked for before we muddied the situation by suggesting moving the art rooms. So that came before there was any financial or budgetary stress. And I want to respond or add to what Peter said. This project is not in trouble financially. There's never been, in my 35 years of experience, a project where, when you're done designing it, there's an extra $400,000 sitting around. The needs always exceed the budget, and it's a year-long battle to constantly get it back under control, and that's just the norm. Sure. And what you want to do is make good decisions, and the Riverview roof is a good example. When we elected to button up to those schools, we were told those two roofs needed work. It turns out that Mullen is a miracle that the building's not a swimming pool. I mean, the roof was saturated with water. Riverview, on the other hand, about 10% of it needed some repairs. So we didn't know that initially, and we have no problem putting a brand new roof on Riverview now. But our advice to you is, don't make that decision until you know what other compromises that might cause. So that decision we recommended would be made when bids for the whole project. Then all the information's on the table.
Okay, has this been the final project? The roofing has been done and it's approved from Mullen School. Has the finalized project been submitted to SED?
Nope, we're coming up August. Tell me what our design schedule is.
We have August 2 more weeks.
And by the way, excuse me, Mike Conroe, who some of you have met, has been working behind the scenes with Leanne Stepien for months and months and months and months. Leanne could not be here tonight, so Mike volunteered to come. Any really difficult questions, I will refer to Mike.
That gets me off the hook. The short answer is in 3 to 4 weeks, it'll be going to SED.
Okay, and what is the time frame? The last time you told us, what, 12 to 16 weeks? Are we still
But the reality is it doesn't matter anymore. What we had hoped for was, and I forget what it was when we started this,
When we started the project, our original schedule had 4 weeks for SED.
because SED was reviewing in 2 to 4 weeks. Then it started to climb, but we thought, boy, by midsummer it will have dropped off. It's not. So the ability to get in the ground this fall absolutely required that SED time to stay very short, and we saw that changing probably 3 months ago now. We kind of hoped it would change, but it keeps going up.
So
But at
we're
this
looking
point,
at
it has no
spring?
consequence.
Are we looking at spring for?
Oh, yeah.
We're looking at a winter bid,
It's a great time to bid.
right, early winter bid, and we're looking at an early spring start. And that's, again, we need to review some stuff with district staff and make sure that they're fine with us basically taking over and getting rolling early spring. You know, that field, taking the fields offline for the spring sports, is that gonna work? Parking areas, I mean, certainly in the case of the music addition, we can isolate that area and start that work on the addition there in the spring. That shouldn't be too much of a problem programmatically for the school. But taking over the fields, again, we've talked about it, and I think Whitney has said in the past, you know, we'll make whatever changes and programmatically we need to in order to get into the ground in the spring. But that's basically where we're at. I put together a schedule in pretty detail. It shows us getting in March into the ground. That gives us a couple-month cushion for submittals and all the paperwork on the front end of the project to get going. And we're looking at an August completion of the field.
Slowly?
This,
Slowly completed so they can play on it
Yeah.
next. Disc is out.
August 2013.
Is it possible, being that there are so, I guess, questions in the community, have you ever submitted a press release to the newspaper kind of explaining where you are in the process and why, you know, like, what has taken, you know what I mean, like, because everybody, I
We
guess, is
could.
wondering.
We could,
Rather
I've
than
done,
wonder, can we not just give them the facts?
I've done public meetings where you can put a call out to the public and say, look, we're gonna have an informational session if you wanna ask questions of architect and construction.
I'd much
manager.
rather the information come from you than hearsay.
Yeah, and again, I'm willing to participate in a public meeting and answer any questions that the public may have. Like a town hall type meeting.
That and the newspaper in case somebody can
Yep.
be here.
Yeah, and certainly the newspaper could come, we could have some materials ready for them.
We can issue a press release, but no one will publish it. But we can supply the information to the district.
That's what I mean.
Okay.
And then we can put that on the webpage, the webpage has the current information, because what they have right now is just this, the flyer that went out prior to the vote. And I think this is where the confusion's coming.
Oh,
We don't have anything more recent on the
Sure.
webpage. Stuart?
So I guess my question is why that is still on the web, because May 1st, we had a presentation and the change in the design was submitted, so it should have been updated on the web. And it would have eliminated a lot of the discussion.
Yeah. But what people are seeing is this, the flyer.
Yep.
And we can't talk to the flyer because so much has happened since then. Okay, does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Stark?
I'm just going to revert back to the Riverview Roof for one reason. In the very beginning, we were told this thing needs a whole new roof. And this is basically what we put out to the voters for the referendum, and it was approved by and dandy. Now, in my little mind, miraculously, this thing doesn't need a new roof. But reading some past information that was given to me, skylights were needed, and I didn't see that. How many bids are you going to go out for this thing? And if it comes in that it does need a new roof, how will that impact our budget for this project?
When you talk about the process we use.
Well, we,
Actually, I'll talk to you.
That's why we shouldn't have had such a rush meeting.
I can,
Well,
want me to start?
Well, no, because we'll do the background. Some months before the project went to referendum, and I can't remember the exact timetable, a question came up about Well, I think it was tied into the notion of building a new Singleton elementary school. So that notion had been floated about building one brand new elementary school and closing all the others. We, Dr. Van Tine asked us to do a projection of data on cohort survival, or whatever that's called, to see where the populations of the elementary schools would go. And we simultaneously did a high-level estimate of what the cost to the community would be of building a new elementary school versus renovating existing elementary schools. So that data showed that the population at the elementary school level it was 6 or 7 years, I don't remember exactly, would reach the point where it could be accommodated by Riverview and Mullen. So we said, all right, what would it cost to renovate 2 schools? And when I say cost to the community, because SED fully funds renovation, but when you build new, they don't pay for cafeterias, they don't pay for gymnasiums. Well, they pay, but not what it costs to build them. They pay as workstations or teaching stations. So we did that analysis, and I don't remember the numbers, but it was going to be like $100 grand more to build a new school than it would be to renovate 2 existing schools. Something on that order. It was a huge difference in the cost to the community. And at that time, I don't know who else was in the meeting, Joe Giarrizzo, I'm sure, but I remember Dr. Van Tine saying, well, there's no way this community is going to say, let's spend $100 million more to house the same number of students as we could house in renovated schools. So at that point, the notion was, Paul Maziarz had let us know that the roofs were not in good shape. So at that point, we said, well, let's, as part of this project, button up those 2 elementary schools so that in the 5 to 7 year window, you'd be in good shape up until that point. We never inspected the roofs or did any of that preliminary work. We accepted Paul's information that the roofs weren't in great shape. Then, when it became a project, Mike will talk about what we do to evaluate a roof.
So we went up first and just walked the roofs. When we walked Mullen the first time, you could tell it was certainly of its age. The membrane was shot, not just the expansion joints and the copings and around the skylights, but the entire roof was in trouble. So we knew we had to do a real analysis of that to see what was actually going on. We then went over to Riverview and went up there and saw little to none of that. The membrane was in really great condition. It didn't explain why there were some leaks in the building. It didn't explain any of that. Then we looked at some of the expansion joints, and right at the edge, at the gravel stop, the edge of the roof, the membrane glues down to the metal flashing that goes over the edge there. Well, at those areas, it had peeled up a little bit, so it was letting water come in. The membrane was still in perfect condition. So what we did is we hired Tremco, roofing company. They come out, inspect the roofs. They take a core of the roof, look at the assembly. What they do is they send it to a lab, and they take, the roof's a series of built-up plies, and then there's a mastic that glues it all together.
There's insulation.
Yeah. So if that mastic, if they didn't put enough of it down originally, which they didn't at Mullen, those plies come apart and then the roof leaks. At Riverview, they put more down than they needed to, and the membrane is in really great condition. So what we had, so what we did next was we had them do a thermal scan of it. So what they do is from satellite imagery, look at the roof, and they can tell if you do it, you have to do it when it's been dry and rain and no water on the roof. They can tell the amount of moisture that's actually in the roof through these scans. So we had them do that. We could see that Mullen was saturated the entire roof. Yeah, right. When we did Riverview, it was just spotty areas. So then what we did is have them go up, and there's this little scanner that they come up with, and they go every square foot of the roof, and they actually tell where the moisture starts and stops. So then they chalked off the lines, and you can go up on Riverview and see those chalk lines where it's wet. And it was isolated right around the skylights, right around the perimeter edge, and right around the expansion joints. So all of those are minor repair pieces, but that membrane is still in really great condition. And they'd be willing to warranty that membrane going forward if we were to recoat the roof. The roofing manufacturer said, you don't even need to recoat this whole roof. Just redo the expansion joints, redo all these areas. You're going to get a couple of more
basically, if I'm looking, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. My mistake. Go ahead.
So what you're saying though is just by walking out there, you couldn't tell just by eyes look that you have to have the imagery or the thermal.
Right, you have to cut a hole in the roof, you have to see what's down
I
there.
mean, if you're getting leaks through the ceiling, obviously you think something's wrong with your roof and there's a leak, but you can't tell with your naked eye if the whole roof needs to be done or just certain sections.
Not generally. When you got up to review, you could see on the expansion joint where it was cracked. It was obviously coming through.
On Mullen, we cut a test hole at the pre-bid meeting when all the roofers were up there. The water actually came bubbling out of the hole that we cut in the roof.
That's not good.
No,
It's
so,
been a dry summer.
right, and this is after, I mean, I don't know how hot it was that day, pretty hot that day, but to see water come, I was amazed. I'd never seen that in 20-some years in this
Are these
business.
broken pipes up there or something?
No, it's just,
Just wondering.
that's accurate.
Yeah, just piggybacking on what you said, sir. You're telling me the flashing around the sides of the building, how much of that flashing is it just in isolated areas?
Well, Paul actually
On other
redid,
sides, I should say.
Paul actually redid about a third of it, half of it, a couple years ago, and that's glued down, performing great. The rest of it needs to get done.
I'm sorry, Paul, were those weather sides that you were going down and repairing?
They were not, no.
No?
No. No, we did a repair like that at Highland, the entire perimeter of the center of the building. I think we spent about $7,000 of it. We did it out of my own budget. Worked out very well over there, and basically is something that has to be done at Riverview as well. I was through all of the core testing with them on the roofs, and Riverview is very remarkable, the good shape that that roof is in. I do have pictures of all of the sampling that was done that these gentlemen have provided me with. And I believe that if that's done, my estimation is probably another 10 to 20 years, because it's very, very clean and very dry under there. So the perimeter is a big part, and then, as Mike said, there's an area in the center, like around the chimney and some other areas, which is the equivalent of about 10%, which I believe will definitely take care of the problem there. And as you said, what you see inside visibly, you know, it can be coming from way over there, so the infrared testing is necessary. And, you know, that's what we did on both. We did it on this roof here. We had to replace an entire section of this because it was like Mullen, it was left for so long. That's why we did the extensive testing at Mullen, just to make sure that everything was solid up there. So,
One last question, I'm going to stay on this, sound like a broken record about the Riverview roof. Prior to any work being done, how many of the roofing contractors are going to look this thing over?
We put it out for open bid.
Okay.
And as many that want to bid on it can bid on it. We
How many
received
bids?
7.
Seven so far, are they basically all saying the same, or anybody who's just way out of line saying
No,
you gotta rip the
we
whole building
tell
down?
them what we want to have happen there. We don't open it up and allow them to recommend what they want
Yeah,
done.
this set of drawings and
We
specs
set
that
out.
we bid, we have a pre-bid meeting, all the roofers are allowed to come out, inspect the area. They followed up with some questions, Wendell answered those questions to clarify any issues or questions they may have had after they saw the roof. And then those bids came in, and we sent you a memo on those. We were there with the district and Wendell to open the bids publicly. And again, those are lump sum bids. It is what they bid is it. They're bonded companies that bid this. And, you know, it's a pretty straightforward process. So in the case of Riverview, where there's some smaller repairs and things that we think would be reasonable to do, our recommendation was to put that in with the main project and take those bids at that time. The reason, just to back up a little bit, it was never really, at least my intention, to do that Riverview work this summer. But because we had a roof bid going out and it was a pretty negligible amount of work, I said, why don't we include the Riverview work in the bids as an alternate? And we're basically getting free information of what a roofing contractor says it's going to cost to do that work. It's not costing us anything other than a little, some drawing and administrative to get that price. But now we have a definitive number of what the cost of that roofing repair is at Riverview, based on the work that was on the drawings. And so, I had planned on there being any controversy over Riverview doing it or not doing it. From our perspective, it was, if we have an opportunity to get a price from somebody and understand very definitively what the cost of that work's gonna be in the future, why not roll that in? Now we have an understanding for our estimating purposes what the real cost of that is.
And the reason for that is new roofs are easy to estimate, but because bidders bid them all the time, and you can say it's 5.25 for the insulation, et cetera. Repairs, there aren't any manuals to go to, what's the cost to repair roofs, so we thought it was best to get some actual bid prices, which would give us the data. And just a quick elaboration, when Mike talked about Tremco coming out, Tremco provides those moisture tests as a service. We actually paid for those, right?
The second,
So we weren't looking to them for recommendations about what to do. We were looking, they have the machinery to test the roof and find out where the moisture is. So we just use it as a service.
For the Mullen roof, when did that go up to bid?
It came in July 9th.
When did it go out?
The end of June.
It was a short bid period. It was a 2-week bid period.
Okay, so it went out in June?
The 29th is when we did the walkthroughs, and according to the
Who did the walkthroughs?
When you put them out to bid, all the contractors are allowed to come in.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't the board that was supposed to do the walkthrough, because I don't think we ever did
No,
it
no.
last year.
No, the bidders do a walk.
So it went out on the 29th and came back July what?
9th.
It went out, I believe, on the 20th. We had our walkthrough on the 29th, and the bids came in on,
30th when you opened them on the 9th. The ad said we were doing walkthroughs on June 29th. That's the way the ad's in the paper.
Okay, so my question is why didn't we get notified until July 18th that there was gonna be a meeting to vote on accepting one bid from someone that I didn't even know that we sent out the bids to?
I'll answer that. We typically try to time bidding to a board meeting. So we say, okay, we'll receive the bids on this day. That'll give us 2 weeks to evaluate the bids so that we can make a recommendation to the board at their meeting. In the case of the Riverview Mullen bids, all the contractors were told how long it would, what the time frame they were going to be allowed to install the roof. They all said, the low bidder said, oh, this is perfect. We're just finishing up a roof at Frontier Schools. I'll just move the crew right over here. So they were the low bidder. We contacted them. Bids came in on a Monday. We contacted them on Tuesday or Wednesday after we had made some reference checks. And actually, you can tell the story. At some point, they said, we're not going to start till September. Was it you they told?
Pretty close, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, we're not gonna start till then. Wait a second, why? Yeah, we can't get the installation in time, and we're not sure that it's gonna work, and the schedule, nobody really thought they could meet the schedule, so we're just gonna start later. No, absolutely not. If that's the way that you wanna approach the project, we're gonna go with somebody else. So we actually contacted the second low bidder and asked, can you do it? And they said, yeah, dude, give us the job, we'll do it. Called the other guys back and said, well, we're gonna have to exclude you from the bid because you can't meet the schedule like you agreed to, and we're gonna take your bid box for that. They said, we'll do it, but if we're gonna do it, we need to get approval immediately because we need to order the installation. The installation has a long lead time, so we need to approve the project now. We can't wait 2 weeks for you to meet with the normal board meeting. And that's why.
But with 2
call for it.
days?
Yeah,
made a
well,
difference?
it was very unfortunate, and we apologize.
8 hours.
The couple days frankly would not have made a difference.
See, this is my issue. As a board member, I'm elected by the community to vote on things and to have information in front of me to be able to make an
Right.
educated decision. I was notified the day before it would be happening at 8 o'clock in the morning when I work full-time.
Yeah, and
All of our meetings take place after hours because that's when the community mostly can join and that's when normal business is taking place. Having a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning, I felt like was trying to circumvent me being a board member.
It certainly wasn't.
We can, I'm sure, add this discussion, and he explained that the bids from here on will coincide with board meetings, and there should be no.
I just wanted the public to know that
Yeah.
I take this very seriously, and I like to have my information ahead of time, and I was not able to attend that meeting, so I don't know what the specifics are of that meeting. It would have been nice to get that information beforehand, so that hopefully they are the right bidders.
Yeah.
We weren't able to put any input.
It won't happen again, first of all. Second of all, though, as Peter said, this is public bidding. Public bidding law stipulates that whoever's the low bidder gets the job. So the board really has no, they legally have to approve it.
Not in 8 hours, though.
No, I know. But just so you know, board members are not, I'm gonna regret saying, it's not their role to say, well, I'm gonna call a few people, see if they do a good job.
No,
Low
that's fair.
bidding is low bidding. We have to accept the low bidder. It's really kind of a formality that the board has to accept it. We pushed Whitney very hard, extremely hard, to have that emergency board meeting. And the reason was not that the extra couple days was gonna make a big difference in the schedule. It was having pushed the contractor to say, you have to do it on schedule. We did not want to put him in a position of saying, oh, but we can sit around for a week to get my contract approved. So we did it, send the message to the contractor, things are moving just like this. It was, but it won't happen again. We'll be very cognizant of that. It's Peter's fault.
I do understand.
I'll take the blame, and I can explain more.
I do understand that education law says your lowest, most responsible bidder. As board members, we're voting on this. Our name is going on this, is approving it. So going forward, I would like to have references ahead of time. I know we can't change who the lowest bidder is, but you can be very sure that if something went wrong with that roof, it would be us who would hear, will you approve them? And especially board members who are very supportive of this project would be having the fingers pointed at them by members of the community. Well, this is your project, and this is what you wanted, and then we have a bad deal. I'm not saying this is going to be a bad deal, but when I vote on something, I want to be able to fulfill my commitment to my community, and I want the references in front of me so that I know that I am voting in the most educated manner that I can vote. So going forward, when we vote on the next roofing bid, who's ever going to do the repairs at Riverview, I would like to see the references in front of me that day, not 3 days later when it's already passed by a quorum of the board.
We talked about this at when we did the rep, and we will have the references, we'll have all the
And I do appreciate that, but the public doesn't
the
know that you asked for
contract.
that, so we
Bob
want to
wants
make
the
sure that that's.
contract. So we'll have the contract, the references, and all the supporting documentation in our board documents. Okay? Is there anything anybody else wants? Did I cover everything?
Well,
A
before-
response to the
before
email,
people ask,
is the question.
Let me make a suggestion. What we have an obligation to do is to send the board a letter saying, we have checked references and we recommend. I would strongly encourage the board not to get involved in it, because if it goes south, you can say, our professionals recommended them. If you guys say, well, I checked them out, they're okay.
If you are gonna vouch for someone,
Yeah.
I would have a comfort level there.
Exactly, 'cause
That's-
that's
When
what
I
I'm saying. You
Googled
vouched
his
for
name,
him.
That's how the
I was
process
only
works.
finding a name and address.
Yeah.
And that's what I do as a board member. If I'm good, if I see that we're having a contract to do something, I search that person on the internet to see, because people will throw things on the internet if they have a negative response. When we were interviewing architects, we set up a conference call so that all of the architects, we could call the different districts to put board members at ease that we were making the best choice for this project. So I think every step of the way, we should be making sure we're making the best choice for this project.
Mr. Stark?
Just to piggyback on that, Mrs. Stewart, we have to understand too that not always is the lowest bid the very best thing. You could have someone come in and say, we can do that job for $100, put tissue paper over top of twigs, and the next guy be $200 and give you a whole brand new rubber roof. You know, it's not always the lowest is the best.
I'm gonna ask Mr. Trapp to respond to that.
If they don't meet the specs, then they're not the responsible bidder. That's why they go to such great lengths to have very, I hate to say specific specs, but if they're not following them, they never hit the second criteria of the responsible bidder.
And I don't wanna belabor it, but Buff State, for instance, on the drawings, he's the low bidder, unless, I don't know, it's almost impossible. So,
You're talking about a situation where you had a prior, say litigation between the contractor and the district. They were under criminal indictment for fraud or something like that.
I've actually done it once in 20 years. I managed to get the low bidder out because they lied on their questionnaire. And I caught the lie, and I presented it, and Monroe County actually went with the second low bidder because of a lie on it.
Right.
and I want
It's
to,
it's difficult, that's
and it's not something we like.
hundreds and hundreds of projects that it's happened once.
Yeah. So, it's, the reason you guys hire professionals is when the contractor bids on a roof or anything else, he has hundreds, for the main project, hundreds and hundreds of drawings that he's bidding on. He's obligated to do all the work on the drawings. We're not leaving anything up to his imagination or his discretion. So that's the protection the district has.
In public bidding, he's also providing a bond. So there is a company, a bonding company, essentially a surety or insurance type company that stands behind that company that says, if this company falls down, we will come in and basically make sure this project gets done.
And when we're evaluating the bids, we don't merely check references, we also go through a pre-award conference with the contractors, essentially challenging them and giving them the option to withdraw their bid if they find they've missed something or they've shorted on something. So we grill them, and each contractor, mechanical, electrical, all the contractors, we grill them to make sure that they know what they're doing, therefore qualifying them.
I've had that happen as well. People make a mistake on their bid and back out, and it goes to the second low bidder because they missed something.
When was the last meeting that you had with the district, like to update? I know we had the meeting as a public meeting, but have you had one-on-ones with Dr. Van Tine or anybody lately?
We've had meetings with staff, coordination.
Because I think at the last board meeting, I asked for an update to be sent, like anytime there's a meeting, to have minutes or some kind of a thing sent, because I haven't heard anything since our last meeting, and I want to be, like, you can say, take us out of it, but we have to run for election, and we have to answer to the people. When something goes wrong, they're not going to come to you, they're going to come to us. So I really need to know what's going on.
When was the last?
The construction document phase, which is what we're wrapping up now, is a 4-month long thing. And frankly, we rarely have any interaction with the client at that point because there aren't any decisions being made anymore. We're just putting hundreds of hours into developing this drawing. And that's frankly, this is the biggest problem, is that the public doesn't understand how much effort and time goes into that
I
phase.
understand, I'm very well versed in construction, I've been around it all my life, but the question I have is, I had no idea that this bid for Mullen Roof was going out, and how it came back in so quickly, and then a meeting was called like immediately.
It almost
I
never
want to
happens
be
that
out.
quick.
Well, that's true.
You know what,
I'm
if
doing
you
another
can
roof
let him
project.
know that
We bid
quick,
it.
then someone can
We
let
bid
us
it in
know that quick.
February.
We didn't get notified until 8 hours before, and I'm sure you knew before 8 hours before.
Yeah.
That's not acceptable.
It's almost 24 hours.
Well,
I got you.
you can, but just as, what, I don't feel there's enough time, and I want to be kept up to date. I believe it is our duty to be kept up to date. We hired you, we're asking you to do a service, so you need to keep us up to date.
You're superintendent, right?
Right.
Right.
Okay.
I don't want you to call me personally. I just want to be notified, so if you have to call him, you will then tell me, but just make sure that we're notified.
Is there any more questions? Anybody have any other questions? Jenny?
So, overall, Brian, can answer, we're on target, pleased with the progress. I know you'd like State Ed to turn this around a little quicker, but overall, you're not alarmed. Things are going well. Feel free to jump in so that all of this controversy can be alleviated and we can have a happy project.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't aware there was any controversy, to be honest.
Well, you know what? We're in the same boat now.
I mean, you know, obviously, disappointed that the state ed review is gonna take 3 to 4 times longer than we thought. We were hopeful that we could, because I understand there's there's a perception in the community that, well, we approved this a year ago, why haven't you started? And I think that was a lot of the push to get going on Mullen Roof, to show that there's action and activity going on. And of course, the roof really needed it, and it's urgent, so I think it was right to move quickly on that. But, I mean, I don't see any real cause for alarm. We're gonna get into this project, bid it this winter, get into it as early in the spring as we can. There's gonna be some inconvenience on those playing fields in the parking area as we get this project constructed. We're gonna do whatever we can to mitigate any of those construction issues and minimize them, but, you know, for 6, 7 months, it's gonna be a little uncomfortable on the west side of this building complex, and we're gonna deliver a beautiful project, and it's gonna be on budget.
Definitely need to get that on the website. Like,
So
an
to
update.
summarize, it would be about 3 weeks before it goes to SED, and then we're looking at about 14 weeks for approval, and we're looking at breaking ground in March with a completion of the fields by the beginning of football season.
Right, and let me expand on that a little bit. In 3 weeks, when we get the final set of construction documents from Wendell, we're gonna take those and do our final estimate. Now, to date, we've done 8 estimates on this project. We signed up for 3, and we're gonna complete our 8th estimate in probably about 6 weeks. It takes us about 3 weeks to go through the drawings in detail. And so about 6 weeks from now, you will have our last and final estimate of what the cost of this project is gonna be by each individual scope item. And there may be things that go and become alternates. There's certainly a core project that will be the base of the project, and there will be things that are nice to have, that will be alternates, that will be added on to the project if the bids come in favorably. We'll then have conversations about which alternates get accepted versus which ones don't. But that's kind of our exercise over the course of the next 6 to 8 weeks. We start our estimate, we also get into the drawings, we report back to Wendell, hey, there's a masonry detail that we think ought to look this way with the flashing here, or whatever the case may be. We're gonna look at the same quality issues that we're gonna do internally, and make sure we put out a good set of documents for bidders to try to minimize any changes that are gonna come to the project. We're not gonna catch every single one, but we're gonna catch 98% of them, and put a good project out for bidders and get hopefully strong bids at a time in the economy when I think we can. In the middle of winter, people are hungry, they're looking to fill their schedule for the coming year, and I think we're gonna hit that queue early. We're also gonna hit, which is important for this project, the queue of the turf installers, and try to get our general contractor to get that bought out early, because turf installers, as I told you when I did my first interview, it's one of the challenges to get those people locked in, to get them on site, and to install it at the right time. And they have a limited window when they're installing that, and they're traveling from here. The next week they're in St. Louis doing the field. The next week they're out on the West Coast. I mean, so I think the fact that we're bidding this early is going to put us in good stead to get that field in this coming summer and get it done and wrapped up.
We can get an updated plan of what this project is gonna look like now, so we can take all this old stuff off our webpage, put all the new stuff up with all the new data and the date projections.
Did you say when you're gonna start the music thing?
The same time, probably early spring, we'd like to start the excavation. Basically fence off that area, so you'll still have access into that main entrance, but start the foundations, footers and foundations in the spring, so that again, by September, October, buildings are closed and pretty much finished. If we can get that early start early in the spring and cause you a little bit of trouble in the spring here, hopefully that gets us all wrapped up by the end of the summer and the beginning of the school year. I think so. It's not a big building, it's not a big addition. I think if we hustle and get an early enough start, we can get that enclosed and finished. I'm hoping by school start, but it may leak into September, October a little bit.
And then you will let us know exactly when it goes into SED.
Sure.
You send it out, send it to the superintendent or.
Yeah, and just so you
email
know,
so he can
what
fill it in.
SED, they have this 14 to 16 weeks. We'll get, I think, we get our architectural comments back typically before we get our mechanical electrical comments. They will send us back a list of things they want changed, usually minor details. We'll then incorporate those
not be logged in until a couple weeks later. So, I don't know if that's just a numbers thing, so they can say they reviewed them within the next number of weeks, but sometimes they'll postpone logging the actual documents in. I haven't heard so much of that.
We'll know exactly when you do it.
Yeah, you'll know when they go in.
We
And
just need to keep the public aware of what's happening.
once they get logged in, they'll be on the SED website. You can actually kind of track and see where it's at.
I had a quick question. Where does the bus loop fall into this? Will it be ready for next September?